Hey everybody, this is Greg Black here with our Dev Team final match between Gavin Ender Simon and Jeremy the Fees Fiesel, playing a Soviet mirror. What are you guys thinking here?
I'm just going in with my usual build order. I know what works for me, and I'm gonna try that. No tricks. Just gonna play a good match.
All right, so no tricks from Gavin. How about you, Jeremy? Are you gonna?
At this point in the match, I'm thinking I've either got to out-micro him or out-econ him, so I'm thinking I gotta build at least 5 bears and then take over that initial center area of the map. As you can see, that center combat lane is the major lane between both player bases. So as long as you can hold that down, and especially because it has a short distance, if you can hold it down and then get into their base, get those bears in front of their barracks, I'm thinking I can slow down Gavin's mid-game quite a bit and prevent him from getting that key amount of infantry plus vehicles up at my base.
So it's interesting that Jeremy goes for a heavy bear rush to try to lock down my early infantry production, but I know that he tends to do this, so I just sent a single scout around the back of his base and then let him get all those bears into my base and then go for a quick terror drone to try to take them all out.
So I've got 5 bears at this point, which is a pretty significant investment, but I do have them sitting in front of Gavin's barracks, which is going to not only prevent Gavin from making any infantry, but it also shows me what Gavin's building. So I can tell right now that he's putting up a war factory. He's probably going to create those terror drones, which is the fastest unit he can get out of there to quickly take out all of those bears. The terror drone also makes a great scout and a great harvester harassment. So this time I'm obviously thinking I need to start walling in my harvesters.
And why did you leave all 5 bears there as opposed to say just one?
He really wanted to see what I was doing in my base.
Obviously, it was more intimidating than leaving one bear. I mean,
right.
You see one bear and you think, well, maybe I can take a bear and then take that bear out. But if you see 5 bears, well, you're going to go for spiders.
That's right. And here we go. Here we got a wall in high-level play. I love this.
So this wall is strategically designed to block out not the whole refinery, but only one half the refinery. You can see the cost is fairly low, and as long as you get 2 build grid squares, both on the side of the refinery and on the side of the ore node, you can block off that entire side from not only terror drone direct harassment, but the terror drone's secondary ability, which at this point in the game is just as good at taking out your economy.
Ooh, and look at that! That terror drone just pops there.
Yep, I was heading after those bears. He got a whole bunch, but eventually ran into the sickles.
Those sickles aren't going to do much good out on the water here.
Here you can see Gavin Simon's key strategy of send terror drones all over the map and see everything that I'm doing. He does this very well.
Yeah. In this case, I did get that scout into your base, so I saw you were building walls, so I stopped my terror drone production after that, just one. I wanted to scout your water expansion to see if you're going that direction or not, because I knew if you weren't going to go there, you were going to expand to the only other land expansion.
So you can see that Gavin has not only walled in his things in a very similar way, but he's also already expanded out to the water, and that's probably where he's going to create most of his tech structures, realizing from that single terror drone that I don't have any water-based structures, so I'm going to have a very difficult time taking out anything he sticks out on the water here. And here you can see our first major battle. Gavin Simon casts Cash Bounty on his units in order to get some sort of income back from either destroying some of his units or some of my units, but I quickly destroy his oil derrick and then jump down to the lower level. The only problem is that I can't get those sickles out until that jump cooldown is up because they're stuck in that particular area. So I'm spending my time microing these 2 terror drones. My plan at this point is to have one of them lock down that harvester and then use the other one to lock down sickles, which you can see happens, but here's one of those key instances of too much micromanagement. I tried microing that second thing to stop his sickle when it was already auto-attacking, and it missed, and that gave Gavin this key opportunity to take down both my terror drones and attack my base.
Now, Gavin, what are you doing here? I'm seeing a lot of sickles heading into some, what were those, hammer tanks?
Those were hammer tanks. I tried to press the advantage, which I did have in sickles, but Jeremy did a good job teching quickly, and he got enough tanks in time to force me to back away.
Now, where are all those terror drones that you had? Shouldn't they be going after the hammer tanks right now?
I only built one of them, but I've got to, now that I saw his hammer tanks and I'm behind him on the tech tree, I'm going to build a couple more right now.
Jeremy, what are you thinking here?
So here I'm thinking that I obviously have the advantage by having more hammer tanks, and if I can micromanage my sickles really effectively, I can stop his terror drones. I realized that Gavin did this early expansion and was therefore going to be behind on tech, which is the reason that I quick tech, in the hope that I could push this advantage and move my MCV up and take that central expansion. And also at the same time I was thinking, well, if he's going to go for terror drones to directly counter my hammer tanks, I can easily get at him with twin blades and use his lack of anti-air support against him. And so this is what I'm thinking at this exact moment. I saw his terror drones, I saw his forces. I'm thinking I need to play defensive, I need to get those twin blades up, and I need to take some map control.
It's interesting. I'm also thinking of playing a little bit defensive right now, which is why there's a lack of action, because I know he's got a tech advantage of me. My economy's probably a little bit ahead, but I'd like to hold there until I can get some hammer tanks of my own up, as you can see right now.
And I can't help but notice the MCV rolling into the front lines. What are you
Yep,
gonna do
well,
there?
he does have an advantage of me on hammer tanks and forces still, so I decided to bring along my MCV, which is a great counter to hammer tanks. Unfortunately, that strategy didn't work out so well, as Jeremy does a great job of sneaking a terror drone around the back and putting it into my MCV, and I have absolutely no way of repairing him.
So when I watch games played online where people use a strategy where they try and do the monster truck rally with their MCV, normally that's sort of preceded by a crane being built. Did that ever cross your mind? Did you think maybe with all the terror drones in the Soviet mirror that some repair capability might be used?
I did not see any terror drones in his army, and he did a good job. He had a big army and brought the terror drone from the complete other side, and it was intended to only be a very short distance.
So I used a lot of forces during that attack in order to push against Gavin and get that one terror drone inside of that MCV. Basically, it was supposed to be distractionary, but I lost a lot of my forces. I spent the rest of my money making this guy, a single twin blade, carrying an engineer to drop off away from Gavin's very protected main base and take out that expansion. Not only is that twin blade hitting his harvester, but I also was able to capture his structure. Now, granted, the one drawback from that was that I didn't have very much money to continue producing units back at my base. Gavin brings his entire force in at this point, realizing that he doesn't have an MCV, but he has an economic advantage, and he needs to press it.
And as you can see, the MCV has a whole lot of hit points, so it's going to take that terror drone a whole lot of time to kill it, so I can use it quite nicely to aid in my advance. And right here, it actually looks like, despite the heavy loss, that I've got a bit of an advantage here, as Jeremy doesn't have much that can push my army out of his base. The key is the Tesla coil that's being built right now, and those Tesla coils are nasty, and it's going to destroy my entire army. So I do the only thing I can do, which is to take down the prereq and the power, which is that advanced power plant right there.
Now, Gavin, I can't help but notice you're standing awfully close to that advanced power plant. Are you aware of the fact that when they die, they explode?
You know what? I am, but at the time, I must say, I was in a little bit of a panic because that Tesla coil was just so scary. It was one of those select all attack moves, and it was a total noob mistake.
And look at that, your army destroyed. What are you thinking now? You've just seen this happen, Jeremy.
Well, at this point, during that whole process, you can see that I actually canceled the Tesla coil several seconds before he blew up the advanced power plant, realizing that without that power plant, it wasn't going to do me any good. I packed up the MCV several seconds before he destroyed it in an effort to get the MCV out of the way, and basically realized I actually stood up after this happened and looked at Gavin and said, "Dude, you killed all your dudes."
I was a sad panda at this point, and it was something I will learn.
So I couldn't help but notice a couple of conscripts getting mowed down by those twin blades. What's your plan there with the conscripts?
So at the time when I was in his base, taking out everything, I had all of my factories rally pointed into his base, knowing that I needed to get all my forces there without an MCV. It was all or nothing at that time, and those guys were just the leftover stragglers, and I think I was still dumbfounded by the mistake I made with the power plant that I let those two go. But
now at this point, I have one terror drone that snuck around the back of Gavin's base. He's general level right now, so he's moving really fast. He's able to withstand quite a bit of damage, and he's able to heal himself. So he's running in and out and trying to do some hits to Gavin's economy. We're both basically on the same economic level at this point, and I realized that I was behind on expansions, even though I was ahead on production structures. Realizing that Gavin was going to have to recreate his MCV, I expanded up to the upper level, and because both of us had our superpower plants destroyed, we're both back to Tech 1, so I threw down a single defensive turret, realizing that it would hold off most of those early game units and allow me to grab that expansion point and continue rebuilding while Gavin had to rebuild his MCV.
And on top of that, because I have to rebuild my MCV, that means that to defend myself, I have to rely almost exclusively on infantry here, because that MCV has a $5,000 cost and a minute build time, and my over-reliance on infantry turned out to hurt me pretty badly later.
Yeah, that can be a real dangerous strategy when you're talking about Soviet mirror, what with all their desolator airstrikes and whatnot.
And given that we've both already gone cash bounty, we know that each other is going for desolator airstrike. We've thrown a couple of them down in the field, and here I'm making the same mistake though, making a grip of flak troopers in order to keep out. I was expecting at this point a large number of sickles to come into my base, and then jump down here, even bypassing the rest of my base. During this time, Gavin has also been micromanaging his terror drones. Here you see one that has already taken out my southern harvester. I was able to shell up the northern harvester and throw up a wall before I got up there, and I'm rebuilding my southern harvester, although I still do have the economic advantage.
And so, what are we seeing right now, guys? We're just, oh, wow.
Some harassment. Was that your desolator?
Well, it certainly wasn't yours not having an MCV.
So that was.
That is true.
I had General Terror Drone up to the left who was sitting off in the water, and I was going to try to take out your units there in order to get him in and attack that unit, but you had a couple of sickles there, so I wasn't able to do anything. He basically sat off next to your water-based expansion points, just playing prevent the expansion for the rest of the game.
All right, Gavin, now you've got your MCV back up. You got some, your war factories back in action. You got a bunch of flak troopers and sickles. What's the plan?
So I knew I was still behind in tech because he, without having to rebuild his war factory, is going to get back up there. I put down a crane because I was floating a little bit of cash after all that action, and I was going to try to rebuild as quick as I can, but yeah, I needed to hold him off for just a little bit longer to get back in this game.
And the Bullfrog?
He was harassing my base with some twin blades, and he kept retreating them back to his base in a fairly damaged state, so I was going to try to sneak around the back and see if I could catch one of them. You see a couple of them retreating right there. I was hoping the Bullfrog could come around and shoot him down.
Finish him off. All right, and neither of you have actually taken that ops post yet. Why is that?
Both of us, I think, are pretty darn good at scouting in general. I had General Terror Drone around the back of Gavin's base running in and out and healing himself up. And Gavin, as you can see, just wantonly runs random things in my base, realizing that I'm bad at countering that.
Well, you did bring the correct counters over here. Unfortunately, they're not amphibious, but this battle is probably pretty insignificant in the grander scheme of things at this point.
Here we go, retreating out to the water, always a sound strategy when you're the poor, loathsome Bullfrog driver. And these guys have just been sitting up here doing nothing.
Well, I think they're waiting for a Desolator airstrike. Gavin, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I would love to press into his base, but that sentry gun, there's just not much I can do with only tier 1 units there. I just don't have a big enough advantage.
Hold on, look at all those flak troopers you have, man. You're telling me those flak troopers aren't going to be able to take that thing out with the sickle supporting? Come on
that's,
now.
Our hard counter system.
Have you considered growing a
game.
pair of huevos? That is my question.
And here is the sad and unfortunate loss of General Terror Drone. As you saw, Gavin's Bullfrog ran around the top side of my base. He met General Terror Drone in the water. He got infected, and then he ran into Gavin's crane, which was the end of Jeremy's Terror Drone.
It's very sad.
His reign of terror, if you will.
Oh, and here we go.
They're so good. Yeah, hammer tanks aren't so good against flak troopers, so I thought that was a bad idea.
Yeah, unfortunately, flak troopers also not so good against desolator bombs.
Oh,
and here is where that over-reliance on infantry came to hurt me. I was doing just fine, but that's most of my army right there. I still got the sickles, but with my flak troopers dead, I no longer have a sufficient counter for the hammer tanks.
That is rough right there. And Jeremy, do you have any repair capability at this point, or is that
as a true Soviet player, I don't really believe in cranes and repairing. You should sacrifice for the motherland. More often than not, when one of my hammer tanks gets terror drone, I'll have another one of the hammer tanks force fire in secondary mode, so that not only do I get to kill the terror drone, but then I get that additional turret.
Yeah, not to mention any health you might leech off.
Exactly.
Very nice, very nice. And here we go. We're just kind of stalemating, hanging out, building up our armies.
And at this point, I had snuck around the back of Gavin's base, realizing that I had pulled most of his units into that center area for that fight, and I used that distraction of him sending all those units up there in the Desolator airstrike to send in another engineer inside of one of my damaged twin blades, dropped it on top of his refinery, and was just about to capture it when he sold it.
And Gavin, at this point,
I'm building some terror drones, but he just has a critical mass of units that he's able, and good micro, and is able to take down the terror drones before they get up there. And that's my only viable counter to a good mix of hammer tanks and sickles at this point. I'm gonna use my own Desolator Strike, which unfortunately isn't as effective against heavy armor, and do the monster truck rally again. But it's without an army to back it up, it's not going to work as well this time.
Too late. You can see at least one of those hammer tanks is actually going dual barrel. Very nice. And do you have any sort of plan to fight this army off at this point, Gavin, or is it just a long
I'm building as many flak troopers and terror drones as I can because he's got no infantry, so that's my best bet. But with him taking out that harvester there and him forcing me to sell my other refinery, my funds are quickly running dry.
So at any point, did you consider retreating back out to the water and going for an all-naval strat?
You see my MCV, and the use that it had. It got a couple tanks. It served its country valiantly against its country, but that was my one shot.
And at the same time, Gavin's got to realize that I've got a lot of twin blades around, and I've got map control at this point, so it was really only a matter of time.
And look at that, that's GG. An excellent game on both your parts. Gavin, dethroned finally after so many years. Jeremy, the new champion, how does it feel?
Interesting. I've got a lot of more people knocking at my door asking for games now.
And autographs, I'm sure. All right, well, thanks everybody. This has been the Red Alert 3 Dev Team Final between Gavin Simon and Jeremy Fiesel. Good game.
Good game.
Good game.